some of this research was very off the mark. And an example of this inaccurate research was done by Bruno Bettelheim, who believed that autism was caused by unloving cold mothers. Well, how rude. He coined the term refrigerator mothers to describe these mothers. Oh my goodness. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to another video. There was this article that I recently came across by Harkla about like the history of autism, and since it was like Autism Awareness Month, I thought that I might just read the article. I found it kind of interesting. Harkla, this isn't sponsored, and I want to clarify that I have not used any of their items yet, but I want to try them. I even have the vest in my Amazon wish list, but basically they have a bunch of products, don't know why that was so hard for me, for people on the autism spectrum or with sensory needs. They have like the weighted vest that I mentioned that is in my wish list. They have like weighted blankets, and I don't know what else. They're still kind of like fairly new to me, but I wanted to read the article, so let me pull it up. Alright, here it is. I also want to add that shortly after this video there should be another one on autism, but it's about me and growing up with autism before I even knew about the diagnosis, which in the video I'll tell you why I didn't know about it yet, even though I was already diagnosed. Hi, cat. It says autism while it was a diagnosis. Freaking cat, he always wants me when I'm doing something. Is now referred to as autism spectrum disorder, ASD. This is because there are 5 different disorders that are all under the blanket of ASD, which will have different symptoms and severities, but are obviously related enough to be categorized together. To keep our timeline straight, these 5 disorders were all brought under ASD in 2013. So when I was diagnosed, they're like in their own little thing, which I'll explain in another video, and now they're like all in one thing. A quick overview of autism before we jump into its history is that it is a brain disorder that begins very early in a baby's life, but typically starts to show major symptoms around the ages of 2 or 3. Sorry if I'm looking away, I'm looking down at my phone. With new screenings, however, we are beginning to be able to detect autism as early as 1 year old. This is great news because the earlier a child gets treatment, the better their outcome. Autism, while it begins early in life, there is not a cure for it. There are certain individuals who do improve their symptoms enough to test off of the spectrum. Where did the term autism come from? The term autism has been used for a little over 100 years now. It was first used by Eugene Bleuler, who was a Swiss psychiatrist. He used it to describe schizophrenia, which is not associated with autism today. Also had schizophrenia as a child, another story. Autism or autismus as it was in the original Latin that Bleuler used, comes from the Greek word autos, which means self. It was meant to describe the isolated self that he saw in those with schizophrenia. However, the first documented cases of autism, as we would diagnose it today, go back further than Bleuler. The timeline and history of autism. When was autism discovered? The earliest well-documented first case of autism goes back to a 1747 court case where Hugh Blair, a Borg's brother, petitioned to annul Blair's marrying to his wife to get a Blair's inheritance. Interesting. The court documents describing Blair show very strongly that he had autistic symptoms. The next case is that of the wild boy of Aveyron. This is what I found interesting. Who was a feral child who lived in the wild for 7 years and was brought back into society in 1798. Very good notes were taken about this boy and people's attempts to teach him language and social skills. Reviewing the notes has led modern day researchers to believe that the boy had autism based on his ability to learn, to communicate, and some of his behaviors. There is not a lot of history between those first two cases and when Bleuler coined the term autism in the early 1900s. So it actually became a label in the 1900s, even though it goes further back. The more modern meaning of autism takes shape. It wasn't until 1938 that autism started to take on more modern meaning and separation from schizophrenia. This came because of Hans Asperger of the Vienna University Hospital Research in investigating what came to be known as Asperger syndrome, which also wasn't its own thing, but now it's also on the spectrum. In 1943, autism became even more defined when Leo Kanner came up with early infantile autism to describe the behavior similarities in 11 children he was working with. Some of the behavior these children shared were autistic aloneness and insistence on sameness. Between Kanner's diagnosis in 1943 and the late 1960s, there was a lot of confusion around the term autism, when it getting mixed up with terminology like infantile schizophrenia. However, in the late 60s to mid-70s, autism started to get more attention. Research and definition, however, some of this research was very off the mark. And an example of this inaccurate research was done by Bruno Bettelheim, who believed that autism was caused by unloving cold mothers. Well, how rude! He coined the term refrigerator mothers to describe these mothers. Oh my goodness! I have not read this far down yet. I wanted to be surprised with you. And this was countered by Bernard Rimland, who was a psychologist with an autistic child. In 1964, he published Infantile Autism, the Syndrome and Its Implication for Neural Theory of Behavior. That helped define and direct research at the time. Treatments used in the 60s and 70s consisted of LSD, electric shock and behavior change that focused on pain and punishment. Modern therapies for autism start. It wasn't until the 1980s and 90s that we start to see more modern therapies for children with autism, such as behavior therapy focusing on positive rewards and controlled learning environments. Basically, ABA. In 1987, infantile autism was expanded into autism disorder and finally had a set list of diagnostic criteria to help standardize the diagnosing. In the same year, Ivarlovas, I wonder if I'm saying that right, published the first study showing that intense behavior therapy can help children improve their autistic symptoms. In 1991, the U.S. government made autism a special education category, which helped public schools to offer special services to children on the spectrum. That started in 1991. However, the 1980s and 1990s were all positive movements. In 1998, a study was published that the measles, mumps, rubella, MMR, vaccine causes autism. The study was later debunked, but got enough attention to still cause confusion to this day. You heard it, folks. It does not cause autism. This brings us to a modern day, including the merging of the 5 different disorders all under the autism spectrum disorder title. There's 5. I thought there was only 3. So, I only know 3 of them. Where are the other 2? Please tell me. With this long history of autism, it is interesting to learn that autism now is one of the fastest growing developmental disorders in the U.S., with 1 in 40 children being born now getting diagnosed with autism. This is partially attributed to better diagnoses, but not fully. In the last 40 years, we have seen a 1,000% increase in autism. But don't be scared, folks. I also believe that it was because a lot of people back then wasn't diagnosed like they should have been, and they're getting diagnosed in adulthood. So I don't think the rise is that big, but you know. Research is starting to uncover a lot more about autism and what causes it. As of now, there are about 100 genes that increase the risk factor for autism, with a handful of them being able to cause autism on their own. While the vaccines and refrigerator mothers theories have been debunked, there are still environmental factors, which, when combined with the right genes, can cause autism. Okay, so that looks like the end of it. The author for this particular article is Casey Ames, and he is the founder of Harkla. I would like to know what you guys think of this article. I found it kind of interesting, and how, I guess, people actually thought refrigerator mothers was a thing. Anyway, I can't help but laugh. Let me know what you guys think of this article in the comments below. Let me know your opinions, your ideas, what you think, if you think it's total, I don't know, kapooey. But, until next time, I'll talk to y'all later. Bye, guys.